Hello and welcome to Sound Librarian. I'm Stefan Schutz. I'm going to start by saying I'm not a huge fan of the Grand Theft Auto franchise. It's not because I don't think they're good games. I think that what they've accomplished with these games is really quite outstanding, and there's some elements in the games that are really, really good. My personal preference for playing games, though, is I like to escape, and I like to be able to do things that I can't do in the real world. Now, I know that legally I can't do half of the things that you can do in Grand Theft Auto, but the idea of just running around driving cars and beating people up is just not something that particularly interests me in a game situation. However, I have played quite a lot of the original Grand Theft Auto 3 that was on PlayStation 2, and this is the one we're going to have a look at today because I think this is the one that has one of the most significant aspects of game audio within the entire industry and the history of the industry. And specifically, we're going to have a look at what I think was just a wonderful innovation of the radio stations that they created for Grand Theft Auto 3. We'll also have a look at the other sound design elements as well, but specifically, let's have a look at Grand Theft Auto 3 and have a listen to some music.
This is Head Radio, Love Media Station. Just one of 900 radio stations, 300 TV stations, 4 networks, 3 satellites, 10 senators.
Thank you. Thank you.
Head Radio.
You're listening to Head Radio, the rock of Liberty City for 60 years. I'm DJ Michael Hunt taking you through another set of non-stop rock and fun. It's Head Radio.
This is the place right here. Let's get off the street and find a change of clothes.
So the GTA franchise has been around now for many, many years. GTA 3 was the first really significant one because it was the first one that went into the whole 3D world thing. From a technical point of view, they pushed the PlayStation 2 to its limits, I suspect. The worlds were really, really huge. It seemed to do a very good job of streaming the environment as you traveled around. And this game was simply about stealing cars and driving them around. I mean, obviously there was a storyline and there were lots of little missions you could do, but really this game was about what you could do with the cars in the world. And no other game had come even close to having a world as big as this where you could just grab a car and drive and drive and drive and drive. So that was the design and gameplay appeal of the GTA series of games. And as the games progressed, the worlds just got bigger and more interesting and you got more vehicles. But GTA 3 is where it essentially all started.
Wait here, man, while I go in and talk to Luigi. Say hello to 8 Ball, ladies.
8-Ball's got some business upstairs. Or maybe you could do me a favor. One of my girls needs a ride, so grab a car and pick up Misty from the clinic, then bring her back here. Remember, no one messes with my girls. So keep your hands on the wheel.
One thing that GTA 3 is just an enormous pile of cliches. The gangster cliches, the mobster cliches, the criminal cliches, the cop cliches. This game is just, they've taken all of the very, very sort of typical television and Hollywood movie style, big American city with big American cars and, you know, a dark side full of criminals. And they brought the whole thing to life and plonked you right down in the middle of it and given you a bunch of cars to play with. So the missions themselves generally are variations on a theme. They're almost always a case of go from point A to point B, either pick somebody up on the way or run somebody over or go through a series of checkpoints. And the whole point really is to highlight around the mechanic of driving cars. That's the central part of this game. And that's really what it's all about. So what we have here is the first sort of little story mission. As you can see, I don't play driving games very often. I've so far managed to almost completely destroy this car in a very short period of time. But you play through the story missions every now and again. When you complete them, you're then given some free rein for a while to just wander and explore, pick up some of the side missions, and then after a certain period of time, you'll be called back to get back into the story missions. This, again, is fairly standard format for a lot of games. I don't in any way mean that that's a bad format. Quite often having a recognized standard format gives people the freedom to understand exactly what they're doing and just get into it. So here we've got a thing saying you can go and see Luigi for more work, or you can check out Liberty City. So let's go for a drive. And here's a case where I can get into another vehicle and try some different missions. Although I can tell you right now that I completely fail in doing this because I couldn't work out which button I needed to actually use the fire hose in the truck. So it's interesting that GTA as a game that is centered all around the driving of the cars, in all honesty, the cars weren't the primary concern, I think, when it came to the sound. And this might seem like an unusual thing. You'd expect car game, they'd put all their efforts into the car sounds. Now, the car sounds are fairly competent for this era, but there's certainly nothing special. A lot of the cars sound fairly similar, and they're really not hugely convincing sounds. What GTA 3 is all about is basically the radio station.
That is my cab!
Okay, did you have anything relevant to say?
Yeah, dude, that P-Dude is bogus. Really bogus. That's all. Great show last night.
I appreciate that. That's why I went to broadcasting school. All right, when we come back from these messages that help supplement my meager salary, we're going to talk to Reed Tucker. It's going to be a great interview. We'll be right back.
A good shoe starts from the ground up. At Eris, we make high-quality footwear. In fact, you can find Eris running shoes in over 140 countries around the world. In the past, there's been some criticism about our workers. That's why I'm here at one of the Eris factories so you can meet some of them. Excuse me, sir. Do you enjoy your job here?
It's fun. We get to play with knives.
I see. Is there a real sense of teamwork?
My friend Joey sewed his hands together.
Wow, you're learning some real skills. How about the salary and benefits?
Yesterday, I made $1.
See, that's the kind of dedication we have to our employees and the quality of our shoes. Eris running shoes. Always running from something.
Buying a... including tigers, cobras, manatees, and white...
For this next record comes from Dante's Inferno, originally transcribed in Braille to a chaste Belgian monk after he lost his hearing. This powerful fugue can overpower the senses, much like a 12-year-old nephew who lets you bounce him on your knee one last time. Molto adagio.
Now, the radio stations are absolutely the strength of this game, and it was an inspired idea. You're spending most of your time in a car driving around a city. This game, I suspect, if they hadn't have actually put in the radio station system that they have, I don't think this game would have been anywhere near as popular. Sure, most of the other elements of the game would have been there, but I really, really think that people would not have gotten into this game and would not have spent as much time playing this game without those radio stations. Because really, otherwise you're listening to some fairly average car sounds while you're driving around doing missions, and it's probably going to get a little bit dull. Being able to choose a radio station means that you can choose the style of music that you like to listen to. So it gives players a lot of flexibility from that point of view. You can even listen to the talkback chatter, but you can get a groove happening whilst you're driving that is something that's going to give you the sort of feeling you want for basically, roaring around this map in a car, driving either safely or unsafely, legally or illegally. You can set the scene yourself. So it gives the player a lot of control over the environment in which they are playing. The range of content on the radio stations is also really massive. I'm not exactly sure what level of compression they put on the sound files, but being a PlayStation 2 game, they didn't have tons and tons of space to fill up. And so, as a result, I suspect that they've managed to do some pretty clever things as far as how they've formatted the various different sound files. I don't know exactly how many pieces of music were available in GTA 3. I am aware that in the PC version you could actually add your own MP3s into the folder and then therefore have limitless music to play on radio stations. Now, in most other cases, GTA 3, the sound design actually was very, very basic. As I've already mentioned, the car sounds were adequate because you spent most of your time in the cars and needed to be, fairly competent car sounds. But in all honesty, the rest of the environmental sounds were bordering on non-existent. When you get out of the car and you walk around, there really isn't much other than the sound of other cars. For instance, you walk down to the ocean, So they've focused so much on the radio station providing the ambience, the background ambience for the whole experience, that really this game outside of the radio station and the cars really has incredibly basic and incredibly simple fundamental sound design. And so it seems that they put so much effort into the radio and the car sounds that everything else was just an afterthought. So it's quite interesting that this game defined a lot of new ideas, but from a sound design point of view, didn't really achieve much at all. Now, in defense of the game itself, I would say that there's probably some very good technical reasons in that this is a very, very large game and it doesn't have levels that load so much. Generally, what's in the world is in the world all the time. They have managed to stream the map, however, as you drive around, they stream in areas of the map. So I'm not sure whether they have tried to do that with sound or whether that's just what's in there is in there as far as the sound design. But it is the one area where I would be critical, is the difference between how excellent the whole radio system works and how competent and generally acceptable the car sounds are. The sound effects in general are really the weak point. And it is interesting in that GTA 3 seems to be a game of contrasts. I found that, and I didn't play this game that much, but I found that when I did play it, I found that the controls for driving the car were really quite solid. I wasn't very good at driving the cars, but that was because I wasn't very good at it, not because the control system wasn't good. The control system was really quite solid. The control system, however, for running around in first person with a firearm was awful. It was one of the worst I've ever come across. So in the missions where you had to try and run around with a gun and either commit crimes or defend yourself or whatever, it was really, really not enjoyable. In general, I found that the whole thing of trying to deal with the weapons was just terrible. So it was interesting that we had a game that had fantastic car controls and terrible weapon controls. A game that had fantastic radio implementation and really, really quite average sound design implementation. So this may well have been just the limitations of the technology. It may well have been the limitations of the schedule they had when they were working on it. It certainly didn't affect GTA's popularity. But from the point of view of an observation in audio, I find it quite an interesting subject because it has just two extremes. The really huge innovation and success of the radio system and what essentially is one of the poorest general ambient and specific sound design aspects I've seen in a game of its era, especially the one that was this popular. The character dialogue works fine. There are little bits of character dialogue you get from people that you wander around and see. There's obviously the scripted character dialogue, and as I said, the scripts are designed to support the cliched story, and they do a perfect job of doing that. If you've got a mafia-esque type crime boss, he'll sound appropriate in his accent and his vocal style, and the writing has also been done pretty accurately. So overall, what dialogue there is in the game suits the whole genre, suits the style, and works fine. So overall, GTA 3 really defined a new genre of games. The open world sandbox is how it gets referred to these days. And it was an excellent example of that idea. And the guys at Rockstar for many years have really had a very, very strong presence in that genre. And as I've also said, I think the radio station system was inspired and adds so much life to this game that I think without it, it would be a much, much more average gameplay experience. So there's definitely a lot of scope within Grand Theft Auto 3. Remember the platform that it was on and the limitations of the PlayStation 2. And this is a massive game, really, really massive game. And just the sheer amount of music and content of the radio stations in itself is very significant. So it's well and truly worthy of being on this list of games, and it's well and truly worthy of checking out if you are interested in studying game audio. The gameplay, that's up to the individual. But for me, this is a significant game for its audio, and I hope you've enjoyed having a look at it. Thank you very much for watching.